Hi guys, welcome to another vlog. So in today's vlog, I want to discuss this article that I read yesterday. Somebody had forwarded me this article on LinkedIn. Now this article was by a person, let's call him John. So John happens to be a GMAT instructor, right? So John wrote an article, and in this article, John was basically talking about these series of sentence correction lectures that he had seen. These lectures were conducted by obviously some other company, not by John's company. So John had seen these lectures, and John in this article was basically, lamenting, for want of a better word, he was lamenting the fact that in that particular lecture, all the instructor was doing was telling students how to use shortcuts and tips and tricks to get to the answer on a sentence correction question. John had a problem with his approach because John was of the opinion that it does not teach you anything. So the reason, I decided to bring up this point in my vlog is because I've heard this from a lot of people, instructors particularly. You will see test prep companies focusing their entire philosophy around this fact that they don't teach you tips and tricks, they teach you some deep-rooted concept through which you will get the answer in the right way. The problem I have with this approach is these people make it sound as if using tips and tricks is a crime. If you're using those tips and tricks to get to the answer, you're doing something wrong. Even if you get to the answer correctly and in double quick time, that's not good enough. The fundamental problem with this thought process is these people such as John, are making use of a huge assumption. They're assuming that using concepts and using tips and tricks are mutually exclusive. That you will always do either this or that and not both. This is actually something which is tested on critical reasoning. There are so many arguments which are testing you on exactly this particular logic. If you remember, there's a question on critical reasoning, the OG 16, I think around question 45, 47. There's a critical reasoning question on smokestacks. So the assumption in that question is that you can't do both the things together. It talks about two things. So the assumption that these people such as John are making is that you can't use tips and tricks and concepts together. But you can easily do so. In fact, my approach, if you ask me, would always be to do both. In some cases, you can get to the answer through concepts. In some cases, you can get to the answer much faster by using some tips and tricks. So why should I not do so? If there's a particular question on which I can get to the answer in 15 seconds, if I apply some tip or trick that my instructor has taught me, but I should not do that, I should actually spend 2 minutes on that question just because that's the right way to approach it. That's the most idiotic thing I've ever heard. You see, what you actually need is the wisdom to be able to decide when to use tips and tricks and when to use concepts. And that is what the GMAT is testing you on, because that is the skill I would want in a good manager. But you should have the ability to decide when to use which approach. You should not blind yourself to, one particular approach. That is not the idea. That's exactly what an academician will teach you. If you go through one of my earlier vlogs, I discuss this in great detail how, you should not approach the GMAT in a very academic manner. And this is exactly an example of that. Well, John, for example, would teach you grammar very well, but I don't think he'll teach you sentence correction very well. Keep in mind, your goal is to get to the answer in the fastest possible time. If that happens through concepts, so be it. If it happens through tips and tricks, so be it. If it happens through a mix of both, so be it. To make my point further, let's discuss a couple of OG questions, sentence correction questions. So here's the first question on your screen. Now, a lot of you might have already seen this question. It's from the OG 16. I think it's been there in all the OGs. Now, when I read this question, of course, first I read the entire sentence, and then I do a first word split. So I see 2 of the options start with due to, 3 of the options start with because. Now my instructor has clearly told me it will always be because. Due to will never be correct on the GMAT. And I am that instructor, by the way. I'm telling you that. If you ever get a split between due to and because, due to will never be the answer. Whether and if will never be the answer. So the moment I do a first word split, I've eliminated A and B immediately. Then I'm doing a last word split because my instructor told me do splits. Don't read all the things all the time. So I'm doing a last word split, and I see that 2 of the options end with crystallize. One of them ends with crystallizing. So what I'm doing is I'm reading the part that's now underlined, the last part, which says, and fungus was growing. Growing can only be parallel to crystallizing. It can't be parallel to crystallize. So my answer is immediately E. So what is actually a difficult question became a very easy question. I could get to the answer just by doing a first word split and a last word split. I'm not even sure what is written in the middle. I haven't read it. If I had time, I might read it, just option E, just to see if it sounds okay. But mostly I wouldn't, because what is wrong is wrong. So you see, in this particular question, we could get to the answer in very quick time by using what John would describe as tips and tricks. He would probably hate me. Why should I, read every option, waste my time, confuse myself, and most probably end up with the wrong answer? The more you read, the more you will get confused. Keep this in mind. You don't want to read too much. So that was this question. Let's look at one more now. Let's look at one more sentence correction question. Here it is on your screen now. So you see, again, if I'm doing a first word split, I know the correct idiom is holds that. So I'm not even looking at options D and E. They are immediately out. So the tip and trick basically got me down to A, B and C. But now I will have to understand the meaning of the sentence. Now I have to apply the concept. I can't get to the answer just by randomly doing a last word split. So there is a split at the end, but to get that right, I have to understand tenses and I have to understand the meaning of this sentence. The sentence basically says the universe has been expanding in the past, also expanding right now, because it ends with ever since, so still happening. That only comes out by using the present perfect continuous tense, has been expanding. So A is my answer. So you see, in this question I applied both. I applied a tip and trick to narrow down my options, and then I applied my concept of tenses. And that is what you'll be doing on a lot of the questions. You'll be doing a bit of both. So through practice, what you're trying to do is develop that wisdom, that ability to judge. When should I use tips and tricks? When should I use concepts? When should I do both? And that is the way to approach sentence correction. So don't get biased against people who are teaching you tips and tricks, or don't view favorably people who take the high moral ground and claim that they're teaching you all kinds of grammar concepts. Most of that is a waste of time in any case, and it will just confuse you. So you need to learn concepts, but only the ones which are tested on the GMAT. I mean, that is the philosophy that we followed in the SC Grail, for example. Any of you who've gone through the book will know that we only discuss things which are actually tested on the GMAT. We don't go into random grammar, because the thing for you to remember is this: you want to do well on sentence correction. You don't want to learn grammar. There are two different things, and treat them as such. No instructor or no test prep company will tell you this. They will all make it sound like, you are learning some holy grail of grammar, holy grail, huh? But I'll tell this to you up front. You are just learning sentence correction. So approach it in that manner. So I hope you guys found this vlog interesting. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so that you keep getting these videos every day. I'll sign off for today. Have a nice Sunday, all of you.